Auzubillahiminashaitanirajim, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Assalamu alaikum, and a very warm welcome to World This Morning. I am your host Ajra Sakti, and unfortunately my wonderful co-host couldn't join because he had some commitment to attend to. So dear users, I wanted to talk about a social media platform called Twitter. So finally Twitter is introducing the edit feature into its tweeting services. And a lot of people are happy. They are bidding farewell to the typos, to the era of the grammatical mistakes and whatnot. But there were a lot of people within the Twitter who were actually of the view that any benign conversation which is very innocuous could be turned into very malignant one by a very heinous user by just using the edit button. And the people who have endorsed that views in the form of the retweet might not be aware of this development. So you might end up endorsing the conversation which can turn into the hate speech or something like that which you do not have any knowledge of. So that is why Twitter was very hesitant to introduce the edit button. But now, in order to bridge that gap, to bridge that dissonance, Twitter has actually introduced this tweeting function where you can edit the tweet feature just in 30 minutes of the tweeting, and then you can also have the access to the original tweet. But this service will be implemented first within the company, then this beta service will be tested within the few countries, and by the end of this month, we're going to have this tweeting service across the world. So wow, that's a very wonderful development because I am an avid user of the Twitter. Now moving on to our top stories, because on the direction of the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, a digital flood dashboard has been introduced today to ensure transparency in the flood relief assistance and its distribution system. It will provide direct information to the general public about the financial support and the relief goods being received and distributed among the flood affectees. Wow, that's some development because we need to incorporate the technology into the disaster management. The Prime Minister was also apprised during a meeting in the Lahore that the digital flood dashboard has been prepared with the use of latest technology to provide all the relevant details about the relief activities. And besides ensuring transparency in the ongoing processes, general public and media would be kept abreast of such relief measures. Speaking on the occasion, Prime Minister said the audit of the financial aid received for the flood victims would be conducted by the AGPR and the world's reputed audit firm for the sake of transparency. Oh wow, that's a really development because, as I said earlier, it's really important to have the intersection of the technology and how to mitigate the disaster management, right? So moving on to our second top story, it's about Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has thanked Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan for extending humanitarian relief assistance to Pakistan in the form of the immediate dispatch of the tents, emergency food items and medicines. During a telephonic conversation with President Erdogan, the Prime Minister exclaimed that this is the truest tradition of Pakistan-Turkey exemplary relationship. Sensitizing President Erdogan of the havoc caused by the riverine floods, Shehbaz Sharif said that as per the initial estimates, the floods are likely to reduce Pakistan's GDP by over 2 percentage points. He underlined that the ongoing floods have devastated millions of acres of standing crops, houses and critical infrastructure in the country. He conveyed that Pakistan is grappling with the immediate challenge of averting an imminent food insecurity in the country, as well as providing for the rescue and rehabilitation of the victims of the climate-induced calamity. I think that's wonderful that a lot of countries are actually coming to the aid of Pakistan, and actually there's a conversation going on where we need to tackle this climate change because we have seen the devastating impact of it on our country in the form of the flooding. Moving on to our next top story, which is about how we are observing the 57th Martyrdom anniversary of Major Raja Aziz Bhati Shaheed Nishan-e-Haider. Major Raja Aziz Bhati Shaheed was born in Hong Kong in 1928 and moved to Pakistan before independence in 1947, settling in Ladial village of district Gujarat. In 1950, he joined newly formed Pakistan Army and was commissioned in Punjab Regiment. During Indo-Pak War in September, on 11th of September 1965, as a company commander in the Barki area of Lahore sector, Major Raza Aziz Bhatti chose to stay with his forward platoon, which was under incessant artillery and tank attacks for the 5 days and nights while defending the strategic BRB Canal. Throughout, undaunted by the constant fire from the enemy's tanks and artillery, he organized the defense of the BRB Canal along with his brave soldiers until he was hit by an enemy's shell and got the martyrdom. In order to watch every move of the enemy, the brave son of the soil had to place himself in an elevated position. He led his men from the front under the constant attack from Indian artillery batteries. He countered every Indian offensive in his area, and later he was struck in the chest by an enemy tank shell while watching the enemy's moves and was martyred on 12th of September 1965. And this is how we celebrate our heroes, their tales of the heroism which were written by our very wonderful soldiers who didn't protect it themselves but rather preferred to protect their homeland, their country, Pakistan. And now moving on to our next top story, which is about United Nations Secretary General's visit to Pakistan. And one of the PTV World's anchor, Sana Maqbool, has the opportunity to interview him and ask him about the situation, about the flooding situation. So he said that recent floods in Pakistan had been the result of the climate change, as it is paying the price of something that is created by the others. So we will take you towards the video where Sana is interviewing the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is with us today. He has been on a 2-day visit to Pakistan, on a solidarity visit to the country. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary General, for being in the country. And of course, you witnessed the various flood-affected areas, met with the flood victims and the respondents today. And there were some very heartwarming stories also that we all heard. When we take a look at the kind of devastation that has occurred, of course, it's quite different in terms of when you actually witness it. Can you explain to us the way that you have observed what has happened in this country, the scale of this devastation, and hopefully try and translate that for the people and the countries who haven't gotten a chance to see this in person so that they can understand the scale of this devastation?
Well, I have no words to describe what I've seen today. A flooded area that is 3 times the total area of my country, Portugal. I mean, this is unimaginable. We are seeing an unprecedented natural disaster clearly caused by climate change. And this visit today, I mean, we can talk about the numbers, the people died, the areas covered, the number of livestock, but this is essentially about people that suffer enormously. People that have lost their houses, the crops, the cattle, their livelihoods. Some of them have to pay the loans that they had to ask for in order to plant what is now lost. So it is a human tragedy of an enormous dimension. And at the same time, I was deeply moved and inspired when I heard the stories of women and men that have abandoned their property, not take care of their own things in order to be able to go and rescue the neighbors and bring the neighbors to safety.
Right.
I mean, these examples of generosity, of solidarity, and of courage make me feel that the world has an enormous responsibility today. And that responsibility is to massively support Pakistan, because the dimension is enormous and Pakistan has not the resources to be able to support their people and to be able to recover the economy and the country. And not only support Pakistan, but also I think we need to stop this war on nature. Nature is striking back with devastating consequences. It's Pakistan, it's Chad, it's the Horn of Africa, with drought. The victims are not those that pollute. The victims are those that are in the places less protected against the devastating impacts of climate change. So international solidarity is not a matter of generosity, it's a matter of justice.
Absolutely, and you've been saying that, and it's important for, of course, the countries responsible for most of the global carbon emissions to understand that, and the kind of spirit of sacrifice that we've seen today to replicate that. When we take a look at what the UN can do and how the international partners can talk about the conversation regarding climate change and also incorporate loss and damage into it, there is, of course, a lot of effort in terms of raising this issue. But the kind of urgency that is needed or the kind of tangible actions that are needed, we still haven't been seeing that. How can you, or the platform of the UN, help people and countries like ours to ensure that there is action regarding climate change?
Well, first of all, we must raise awareness. We must speak loudly about this tragedy and say that those that are responsible for the climate change that is happening have a responsibility to support the Pakistani people in this situation. But at the same time, it is crucial that financial support to developing countries in relation to adaptation and resilience increases substantially. There was finally a promise of $40 billion per year,
Yes.
but it's not yet clear if that will happen, and that is obviously not sufficient. We estimate the need of about $300 billion per year for adaptation of the developing countries. Of course, there is a possibility to have private investments, to mobilize other resources, but it's clear that there is a strong responsibility for that. And then there is the question of loss and damage that is foreseen in the Paris Agreement, and until now there was no progress in a serious discussion on that issue. I know it's a difficult issue, I know it will not be solved from one moment to the other, but I hope that in Cairo there is real progress, substantial progress in the discussion on loss and damage.
Right. Thank you very much, Secretary General, for joining us.
Well, Pakistan is paying the price of something that was done by others, by the global north, by the excessive industrialization, because Pakistan is suffering of that. To talk more about this visit, we are going to have to talk with Professor Zameer Awan Saab, who happens to be an analyst. Assalamu alaikum, Professor Saab, and welcome to World This Morning.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for taking me.
Right, Professor Saab, so we have seen that United Nations Secretary General is here in Pakistan. He's talking about how there is a huge responsibility on the global north to do more to support Pakistan in this humanitarian disaster, because in the first place, this is not of our own making. And I was researching about it, and he said that there are unquantifiable deaths of human suffering. How do you see this visit? Do you think that this visit will create a momentum with respect to climate change, that we walk the talk about it?
In fact, we were talking about to the international community that the cause of the climate change is not the Pakistan. Carbon emission from the Pakistan is very, very little, very, very less. Actually, some of the industrialized countries, developed countries, mostly the G20 countries, they are the cause of the climate change. Almost 80% is their responsibility or their share of the damaging the climate. And now this flood, which has happened due to their mistake or their reason, they should compensate it. The visit of the Secretary General of United Nations is very important. He has been to Pakistan. He has seen the flooded area. He has witnessed the crisis. He has seen the people and the damages happen in Pakistan. He is appealing to the international community to rescue Pakistan, to assist Pakistan, to help Pakistan. I mean, this is very, very important visit. His statements are very important. The thing which we were advocating, it has been reinforced by the Secretary General. So his visit, I believe, is very positive, and we should officially launch a complaint or a claim for this repatriation. I believe it is not only the rescue operation or saving the drowning people or feeding the hungry people. Actually, the damages which happen to the infrastructure, roads, railways, electricity, damaged houses, it need to rehabilitate. The government of Pakistan should prepare all the estimates and then approach the relevant authorities in the international community through the United Nations and ask for the repatriation or for the compensation. We are not responsible for these damages, and this is unprecedented damages to Pakistan.
Right, very rightly so, and this has been labeled as the climate carnage. But Professor Zameer Awan Saab, do you think that the aid which is coming from the United Nations platform and other countries is sufficient? Because 33 million people have been affected by it. In other words, 1 in 7 person has been affected by these flooding. In the short term, yes, the relief is going on, but in the long term, when it comes to rehabilitation, do you think that we have the infrastructure in place that can help assist the people when it comes to the rehabilitating of their lives? And how do you see this entire scenario, this conversation going on, especially when it comes to the climate change and people not walking the talk actually about it?
In fact, the instant aid which we have received is a humanitarian assistance. It is only limited to the rescuing the people, feeding the people, and very limited. The actual cost of this devastation is rehabilitation, rebuilding the infrastructure, rebuilding their houses. That will be heavy expenses. And the Secretary General has categorically defined that the assistance which has been extended is very little. It is not sufficient. It is not enough. He has suggested that the developed countries, especially the G20s, should fulfill their responsibility, their social responsibility. And we have to make this case very strong after making all the estimates completed by the government of Pakistan and approach them through the proper channels of the United Nations.
Right, sir. And do you, of course, we need aid because the calamity that has struck us, it's so huge that Sindh and Balochistan represents one just huge oceans because that much amount of the water has crept in, and we do not have the sort of the infrastructure in place to absorb that amount of the water because our cities, our urban areas, suburban areas, they are not climate resilient when it comes to that. Yes, we need aid, but do you think the aid will help us in the long term? What is needed in the long term so that we do not face this sort of calamity again?
In fact, to fight against the climate change, it is the responsibility of the whole world. It is the collective efforts required. No single country can fight against the natural disasters. The areas which used to have 50 millimeters of rainfall in a year, this time they have 1,700 millimeters just within a few days or for a couple of weeks, 2 weeks. And of course, this is beyond our imagination. Secretary General has also expressed the damages we have seen are beyond his imagination, are beyond the words to explain. Of course, it is collective efforts. All nations, all countries should come forward and fight against climate change.
Right, sir. And also, why do you think there is not that sort of a momentum which it should be in the first place? Because the effects of the climate change are not just experienced in Pakistan. Of course, Pakistan has suffered so much flooding, and before flooding, we had wildfires, we had droughts, we had heat waves. Especially, we didn't have the weather of the spring this year, and we can also see these effects rippling across the Europe, where they're experiencing worst drought in the 500 years. In America, the weather pattern is very erratic, but yet we do hear the voices which are disrupting the momentum on the climate change. Why do you think there is no momentum on that, especially considering the fact that we are witnessing very visible effects of this climate disaster?
You are right. Disasters are an international phenomena. Many other countries are also hit adversely by the climate change. But Pakistan is the worst victim of this climate change. And the other nations should promptly help Pakistan. Maybe they are not ready, maybe they have not anticipated, but of course, definitely, it is their responsibility, or at least their social responsibility. It is compulsion, I think, that they cause the climate change and they should compensate for the victim countries. And not only to Pakistan, all other countries who are suffering are the victim of the climate change. The developed countries, especially the G20s, should help them. This is the message from the Secretary General also, and I believe that we should pursue our case carefully. One thing more, I wanted to warn that after the floods, sometimes earthquakes also happen. We should be ready for such things. And if Pakistan faces the earthquakes, it is also a big problem and challenge for the Pakistan too.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor Saab, for enlightening us about the visit of United Nations Secretary General. And also, I would once again like to reiterate the facts that are on the ground, that 1 in 7 person is affected by the floods. That is 33 million people are affected by it, and 1/3 of the country is submerged under the water. And not just this, NDMA is predicting another spell of the monsoon season. So it's not just the physical effects of the floods that are creeping in, it's also the psychological effects of it, how this is causing trauma and how we need to look after the people who are suffering from this calamity. To talk more about it, we were going to talk more about it, but after a short break, because we have some very amazing guests over here.
मासूम बच्चे, ये बेबस बहनें, ये भाई और ये बुजुर्ग आपकी फराख दिलाना इमदाद के मुंतजिर हैं। मुतासरीन सैलाब की माली इमदाद के लिए वजीर आजम पाकिस्तान और वफाकी काबीना के कायम करदा प्राइम मिनिस्टर रिलीफ फंड 2022 के अकाउंट में रकूम जमा कराई जा सकती हैं।
Your living is determined not so much by what life brings to you as by the attitude you bring to life. Not so much by what happens to you as by the way your mind looks at what happens.
Welcome back, and before going on to the break, we were discussing about how climate change is the calamity that has struck Pakistan, and the floodings are one ugliest manifestation of that, and how we need to talk about it. And I also mentioned that we are going to discuss the psychological effects of it. So ladies and gentlemen and my dear viewers, why do I felt the need to talk about it? Because once again, I'm keeping the stats in front of you. 33 million people are affected by it, and 1/3 of the country is submerged under the water. So it's not just the one province that is affected by the flooding, it's all the 4 provinces: Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, KPK, Gilgit-Baltistan. And before flooding, we saw the heat waves, we saw the gloves, we saw that vanishing of the spring season. So this is just an erratic weather pattern that is developing, and we have seen that how the United Nations Secretary General has labeled that these monsoons are actually on the steroids, because how they are creating havoc across the Pakistan. So much water has crept into our country. It has destroyed infrastructure. It has destroyed the farming, which used to be a backbone of a lot of people who are especially living in the interior Sindh, who are living in the Punjab, who are living in the Balochistan. Their livelihood is destroyed, their livestock is destroyed, they're suffering so much calamity, and the scale of the destruction is just unimaginable. So in terms of the number, Pakistan has suffered $12 billion more than the climate losses because of the climate change. Yes, aid is coming in. We are grateful to a lot of countries who are pouring the aid into our country. But then again, is it the aid that is the solution, or is it just a quick fix? Because when it comes to the aid distribution, it's a temporary thing. The trauma is going to live with a lot of people who are actually suffering from such kind of calamity. They lost their livelihoods, they lost their jobs, they have lost their fields. And considering the fact that Pakistan is the agro economy, its contribution towards the agriculture in the GDP is massive. And people who have the fields out there, their fields are destroyed. And my team and I actually went to DI Khan, and we witnessed the massive scale of the destruction that has wreaked havoc there. And it was just unimaginable how people are living there. So we are going to talk more about the psychological aspects of the flood and why there is a need even to talk about the mental aspect of such kind of trauma. So I'm very lucky that I've been joined by two wonderful ladies who are going to tell me about the psychological aspects of this trauma. And so I'm very lucky that I've been joined by Dr. Uzma Mansoor, who happens to be clinical psychologist. Assalamu alaikum, ma'am, and thank you so much for coming to our show.
Welcome.
Oh, right. And alongside Miss Uzma, we have she's not doctor, she is Zubia Zubair Saiba. She is a psychologist at Maroof International Hospital. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for coming to our show. Okay, so Dr. Uzma, I'll start with you. So we have seen that a lot of people level this criticism that, the people are suffering from the basic needs. They do not have shelter, they do not have food there, and they have a lot of diseases.
Exactly.
So why even talk about the psychological aspects? Because if you consider the Maslow hierarchy, the basic needs are at the bottom of the pyramid, right? And then the second and the third are the psychological needs.
Right.
Why is there a necessity to talk about psychological aspects of the trauma?
Gigi, thank you, Hajra. Actually, it has been observed that secondary to every natural disaster, we usually face psychological effects or mental health effects later on afterwards. After we manage the trauma, the emergency in trauma, and afterwards crisis management, and then afterwards we have to deal with the crisis of the mental health. Since you have also observed in COVID situation as well that afterwards there had been a massive impact on people's mental health as well, and we in the field also observed that people were coming with some sort of COVID generated mental conditions. So likewise, definitely we are under this process of crisis management. We were just observing whatever being shown here. Afterwards, right now as well, because people's basic needs are not met. You rightly mentioned about the pyramid and hierarchy of the needs. So due to the lack of the basic needs, people might get into this despaired situation, devastated situation where they need to look for the basic needs. So there is a possibility that such conditions might arise later on, but currently we also have to deal with the psychological aspects as well.
Right. I would like to throw the same question towards you, Zubia. Do you agree with Uzma here about the psychological effects, why there is a need of urgency even in the first place to talk about the psychological effects of the trauma?
Yes, thank you, Hajra, and I do agree with Dr. Uzma because whenever we are faced with any kind of disaster, whether it's man-made or natural, we do face psychological impacts because we're human at the end of the day. And our environment actually affects us adversely. Well, it can be positively and negatively. But having said that, I think the biggest impact जो किसी भी trauma का in our country or even abroad when you go through it, it is first of all you go into a state of shock. So because you are in your normal environment and you have a normal household and amenities of life and everything, and then when all of that is taken away from you, of course your body, your mind goes into a state of shock and denial. And that's the first part that we need to deal with. And I think with that, I think the communities play a very large role in this, mental health issue management. I was actually just watching the interview of the UN Secretary General and a few others before our segment started. And I noticed that, we were always, everybody was mentioning, about international aid. And so I feel we need to first tap into the resources that we have existing with us, and those are the communities and those are the relief workers that we have over here. And they are the ones who are actually our source of, we can say, energy for these people. Like you were mentioning a little while ago that you went into the community also, so you are a light of hope for them. And words play a very important part. So when we go, we take a little bit of glimmer of hope for these people. And all we need to do is just be there for them. Listen to their stories, lend a listening ear. And along with that, also give them a little bit of hope, of acceptance.
Right. So coming back to you, Dr. Uzma, like Ms. Zubia mentioned very aptly that we need to give them a light of hope and we need to listen to their stories, and this is what PTP World has done because we given the voice to the unvoiced there, and they did not have access to anything because the infrastructure has been so much damaged there.
Right.
I would like to ask you, since communities are the first responders to any calamity, to any disaster, And also they're living in a very resource deprived area. They do not have basic amenities in the first place, what to talk about meeting their psychological needs, right? So what to do in such sort of setting when they do not have even access to basic amenities? How can we make ensure that they do have access to psychological treatments?
Yeah. As Ms. Zubia rightly mentioned, that when you go in the state of shock, definitely, basically a person's mind is not able or does not want to accept the, the effects of the calamity or whatever has happened to them. So first thing is to help them to understand, to make them, for example, orient to the situation what has already happened, to bring them out of the state of the shock. And for that, there is nothing, on the large scale to be done, but again, going to those people, listening to their stories, sitting with them, at least making your presence visible to them would also help, I think. So when they would know that they are not alone, they have the whole world with them, and of course everyone currently offering their own services in their best capacity, and that could also be done. And of course we are extending our hands to the affected areas, so different organizations are reaching to those people. So probably while inshallah, after dealing with this all effects, we will be able to manage such effects as well.
Lovely. So coming back to you, Ms. Zubia, we have seen that how media can play a very good role or bad role when it comes to conflict disaster reporting, because they can actually lend a voice to the people, to the community there, and from there an aid can flow into that community, that particular area, because of our reporting. And I'm very glad to say that because of our reporting, because of our team went there, and of our exclusive efforts of our executive producer Saab, the aid has actually flown to the area of the DI Khan, of the particular district that we went into there. So I'm really proud of that. Now coming back to my point, which is about the shame. Why are people so much, they feel so much difficult to communicate about the shame, considering the fact that it is closely associated with the trauma and with the mental illness?
Yes, Hajra, and firstly I would like to also congratulate you and your team for all your efforts that you did in DI Khan. And I would also like to answer your question in two parts. The first part was about the media and the positive role it can play.
Right.
So, the first thing is, I think media is a very strong, like convincing source for people, and especially for the masses.
True.
So, having said that, to highlight the success stories, and I noticed that, I was watching a video some time ago, and there were people, and these are not people from the private organizations, these are not from the government, they are just volunteers who are actually teaching people how to clean the water, because they don't have access to clean water. They only have access to that flood water, and this is what they're drinking. And so they are teaching them these things. So these are the stories which we need to highlight in our media to encourage others to come in and help those people, not only with financial aid but also with their own assistance in person. The second part of your question was about trauma. Yes, of course, we have PTSD and different other, like mental health issues which arise as a result of natural disasters. But I remember that, you see, some time ago, I was watching, and there's been a lot of coverage by PTV also and by other channels of these flood affectees, and there was this hopelessness in terms of that, like we don't have anybody. So that when you start feeling alone, when you start feeling that's the part that we need to actually focus on. That, like I know there's loss of life, there's loss of loved ones also, and that in itself makes you go into a sense of despair and despondency. So that's the part we need to now manage. And again, I cannot stress enough how the communities play a role. Children, women, and I think the elderly are the most affected of any natural disasters. And having said that, I think we need to mobilize communities so that they are there for each other. Whenever, it's not, I think it would be very unfair if we think that, we can go and manage everything. We cannot do that. We have to mobilize the local resources so that they can tap into them whenever they need to.
Right. So, thank you so much for saying that. Now coming back to Dr. Uzma. So my team and I witnessed firsthand how there was a feminization of poverty, because women were the ones who were actually working in the fields. They were plucking cotton, they were sewing cotton, they were into the fields. and whatnot. And now those fields have been washed away in the water. There's nothing left out there. So they're already on the marginalized segment, and they're more affected by this flooded. And then coming back to my point, which I wanted to ask is, so in our body, is there any intersection of physical pain with the psychological one? Because physical pain is more, you can feel it more, right? But psychological pain can be labeled as despondency, as a sense of despair. How does it work? Your comments on that?
Actually, mind and body cannot be separated in terms of functioning. As a whole unit, it works. This is a body, a machine that works, with mind and body collaborations together. So whenever we meet some sort of emotional shock, emotional, disaster or anything related to that, it always affects our body. But again, it is made up like a way. There is a system that basically deals with the emergency at the moment, then it deals with the adverse effects at the moment to ensure the survival of an individual in the first place. But later on, after a prolonged period of such sort of emotional disaster or emotional pain, there might be consequences on the body as well. So there is a likelihood that later on a person might suffer some sort of somatic complaints like bodily complaints, or there might be an onset of symptoms like anxiety, depression, but that could be on the later stage. Primarily, one, like you also spoke about the women, of course, they are soft-hearted human beings. They are quite concerned about their family and everything, and they make themselves responsible for providing to their family, especially the emotional support. I think they suffer comparatively more than men. Of course, the suffering to the men is of their own nature, but again, female, they are more prone to such sort of conditions. So there is a possibility that they might get into that. But again, I would come to this point again, because this is the support that we can provide to each other. We can hand over, like we can build the capacity in the population who are already there, so they can be themselves, they can be there for themselves. Second thing you mentioned earlier was the shame. I think this factor of shame, when we of course spread the word and when we talk about such sort of disasters, there is this factor of when you spread the word in terms of like not understanding some people's position. For instance, while giving them, so when we spread all around that people, of course they need help, this is the best part of it, but then the shame comes when they were not, then when they, the life kind of overturned to them, and now they need help of others. So this is also very difficult to grasp for a person, like now they are in the position of taking help. So I think this should also be prevented in some respect, that they should be
not
stigmatizing them, like now they need help, now they are dependent. So this is the different side of the media as well.
Right, very rightly you pointed out that aspect, that I would in Urdu label it as a safed poshi. A lot of people who were safed posh, who were not taking actually the aid, are now actually at the point that we have to accept the aid, and this is what is very traumatizing for them, right? So Ms. Zubia, I wanted to ask you that, is it the internal conversation that is important towards our mental health or mental illness in the first place? What sort of internal conversations do we need to have in order to make sure that we remain sane at a mind?
Yes, thank you, Hajra. And so I would just like to first add to something which Dr. Uzma said, that the mind and body cannot be separated.
True.
So having said that, whatever goes on here will ultimately manifest in your body in the form of psychosomatic symptoms and pains. If you've noticed, in terms of some kind of danger, your body responds faster than the mind. You start sweating, your heart starts beating faster, and etc. So these are the things that actually manifest in us. And you said, you spoke of an internal dialogue, that what is the internal dialogue we need to have within us to actually keep us sane. Now, the mind has its own tendencies of just wandering around all over the place, and if we don't start managing it, it will actually eventually drive us really up the wall. So having said that, the internal dialogue is of grounding yourself. First of all, I think religion also plays a very important part in this, to ground ourselves, right? And along with that, you see, in every community there must be some women who are teachers, some women who are not nurses, some even doctors. So I think they are the ones who need to give this message to the communities of the people who are not aware of these things, through obviously you, through people who are going there, and these are the things we need to actually focus on, and we need to create little focus groups which are dealing with mental health issues so that they can go and spread the message.
Right, thank you so much for saying that. So Dr. Uzma, she mentioned about the religion, the role of religion in maintaining our mental health, right? And I do feel that nowadays, especially in the West, there is this trend of suicides, right? Depression, anxiety, whatnot. And considering the fact that these societies, they're doing very good materialistically, they have a lot of basic amenities which global South might not have, but yet we see that there's a spiritual void that they're suffering, and because of that we are seeing the rising trend of anxiety, depression leading to the suicide, and this is actually a suicide prevention month that we are observing. Why do you think they are feeling this void in the first place?
I think a lot of factors might be contributing to this. Of course, religion does help, and it should help as well. But I think there are other factors. For example, social factors also play roles. Some personality factors also play role. Might be there are some internal inherent tendencies that might lead a person towards this side. And then we also hear about this drug abuse and some other factors which might be into this. So I think in the first place, what I've been always stressing upon is the proper development of an individual, totally it has to have all factors that are required for a personality to develop completely. For example, some social factors, we should have some social setup that should be in place in order for a person to think positively, to act positively, to look for something in future, because unjust in society or other sort of devastation, instability in society, that might cause such reactions. If there is nothing like primary need sort of thing, then there comes secondary need, and then there is this need of love, care, and then need of achievement in somebody's life. So all these needs, whenever they are not met, and when there is no forum, there is no way out to discuss them either, or to make or to create some sort of intervention to that. So it might lead to such behaviors, and again, there is a lot to say about that.
Right. Thank you for putting that very nicely. Then again, I wanted to ask both of your opinion on the article that I read in The Guardian, and that was actually written by a psychologist. So she says that when we say that mental illness should be treated like in any other disease, we are actually contributing towards further stigmatization and disempowerment. And she builds up the case that when you're saying that you have a dysfunctional brain, or there is some sort of imbalance in your chemical reactions in the brain, and you're going to live with that, you're actually ignoring the factors that are contributing in the first place toward the mental illness. And of course, it was Guardian, it was written in a Western society, so they talked about racism, how black people are more disadvantaged, they are being over-medicated, tasered, restrained more. And there is no talk around, or maybe there is a talk around structural racism, but not enough is being done towards that, right? So I really wanted to ask about, when it comes to the suicide prevention, is it really that which you believe that the contributing factor towards it? And she also mentioned that one of our biggest contribution was not in a one-on-one therapy room, but rather advocating for the causes. So do you think that this is the real reason for the mental illness? Do you think it's contributing?
Absolutely. I would also agree to this. Definitely there are a lot other factors as well, and that if there is some medical or other conditions are also there, like brain or neurochemical imbalance, that could be checked earlier as well. So everything could be done. Suicide can be prevented 100%. There is nothing like you cannot prevent it. Of course, when you go into the details, how does the suicidal behavior develop, there are a lot of things to be discussed. But yes, overall, these are the environmental factors basically that contribute to this side, a person who is committing suicide. Attempting to suicide is another thing, but committing to suicide is something when a person definitely does not have any way out otherwise. So I think we can prevent it by considering everything, and destigmatization is also something to be done in this field as well.
Right, your comments, Masubia?
Yes, Haja, I would just like to say that suicide is a very extreme form of helplessness and hopelessness.
True.
Having said that, the family setup and family structure plays a very important role in prevention of that. Right? Family is like a support system that you have. It's like the most basic and initial support system. And then you have friends and, etc., relatives and all. So having said that, when your family structure is not that strong. You see the, you know, even a child can have suicidal thoughts. Teenagers these days have a lot, and these are not problems, I think, of the Western world anymore. They are problems of our society also now. So we need to look at them very carefully, that you know, our social setups are very strong, and asking for help. You know, you talk about stigmatization. It's a stigma even asking for help in our culture.
True.
So asking for mental help in terms of mental health is a big issue over here.
Right.
I think that is very important. So please, if you need help, and through your program I would like to, you know, encourage people that if you do, please ask for help.
Right.
Whether you go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or whether you ask your parents, please seek help when you want
I
to.
would also add that awareness is also required, because seeking help, especially with this suicide thing, people do not approach anyone, you know, because they think that it cannot, then nothing could be done, because again this is the last stage of hopelessness.
Right.
So I think it could be prevented earlier.
Right.
Again, coming out of the therapy room one-on-one, we have to come out in the community and communicate people that this could be prevented, and everybody can be reached out and helped out.
Absolutely.
Right,
If
and
I can, sorry,
sure, go on.
add one more thing, that you spoke about shame. So
Right.
when we shame and stigmatize people for seeking help, you have actually ended their hope there and
Exactly.
then. So that is something which we need to create acceptance for these things.
Right, and what do you think is the stage at we believe that, you know, we should need to ask help? Again, you talked about awareness. What is that particular stage that we need
I
to
think with this awareness of media, social media and everything, and there is a lot of material available as well, there are a lot of factors that could be observed easily, like a person living in a strong family system, as she just mentioned, that there has to be a strong family system. So it is very easily observable. There are some signs that could be easily observed, and you know, this awareness should be on the organization level, on the home level, and environmental factors and other social levels. So we can always provide help.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Uzma, for talking about the suicide prevention, about the trauma which is associated with that. Thank you so much, Ms. Zubia, for providing us the cross-pollination of ideas, that how we can actually play our part in making sure that there is a prevention of the trauma and prevention of the suicide in the first place. So with that, we are bidding a farewell to our viewers, and until next time, it's a goodbye.